colleagues, and welcome to Sydney. Welcome to Parramatta. I'm joining you from Melbourne in the capital city of Victoria, and I'm joining you from here on the edge of the Yarra River, the Birrarung, and I acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we stand on, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples and their unceded claim to the traditional lands, the waterways and the skies and that we meet on. If we could share the slide,
yeah,
please, Basant, that would be good.
Sure.
And if we can move to the next slide. Great. So as Chris mentioned, the introductory comments that I'm making are really at a holistic, top-level perspective. And you've heard from Chris earlier in the week about the nature of the regulatory model that we have for ensuring dams are safe in New South Wales. And you'll hear later from Jason and from Peter about the technical aspects of the regulatory model. I want to take a chance to step back and think about what the opportunity is in our regulatory model and the choices that we have. The diagram you have there is Mana Mary's from one of her articles about the reconciliation of the past and the present in Parramatta. And it's a beautiful depiction of the eels and the outstretched hands and the Parramatta River. And what we can draw from our Indigenous history is the focus of Aboriginal peoples around Australia, whether it be here in the Wadawurrung people here in Melbourne, or the Darug people in broader Sydney area, is the importance of taking care of people and place. And our regulatory model is focusing on making sure that the all risks from the operation of a dam, and be they risks to public safety, be they risks to the environment, or be they risks to economic assets, are of an acceptable level to the community here in New South Wales. If we go to the next slide. So the regulatory posture that we take at Dam Safety New South Wales is really a choice. And when you look at the opportunities that we have in shaping harm reduction, and that's the focus that we promote, it's about tackling the bads, the threats or the risks. And Peter will describe how this regulatory model shifted from the previous technical focus on pure engineering assessment to one where threats of harm, risk management, and cost-benefit analyses underpin the analysis of the things that could go wrong. So the focus that we have is to adopt the language of Professor Malcolm Sparrow from Harvard University. It's about the sabotage of harms. What can we be doing to anticipate, identify, and intervene to support dam owners to be able to make sure that they understand the threats to the safety to the public, safety to the environment, and safety to economic assets through the operation of their dam. But one of the tensions in regulatory models is it about prevention of the bad, or is it about promoting safety and stewardship? Or, in fact, are they the same? And we need to integrate them into our model. And what you heard from Chris earlier in the week as our CEO, and from Peter, who was instrumental in this regulatory design, is that we believe that the dam safety approach in New South Wales is very much about the integration of the prevention of harm and the promotion of safety and good stewardship by dam owners. And therefore, our opportunity in shaping harm reduction is how to be effective as a regulator and how to deliver public value and be accountable for that. So do we focus on the right, the wrong, the good, the bad? And you'll see in the diagram there, which is a picture from a recent national conference, where our team put together an interactive puzzle with the conference attendees from all over Australia and overseas about problems and problem solving, and how do we tackle this, and how do we work together to come up with solutions. If I can move to the next slide, please. When Malcolm Sparrow talks about the opportunities in regulation and the choices that are available to regulators and the governments and communities that they serve, and it's about understanding the nature of the harms that are there. And his call to action for regulators, which we very much adopt, is about picking important problems and fixing them. And to do that, you have to make choices about the most effective and efficient organizational model that will deliver on this purpose. So in doing so, our team are busy understanding what are the things that make these harm reduction efforts effective. And we're constantly testing and checking our thinking about this so that our model evolves over time. We also aim to be quite systematic and very open-minded in understanding what's the problems that are turning up in this high reliability system. So the regulation of dams is, one could argue, very similar to the regulation of other high reliability operations or systems. Aviation safety, for example, nuclear energy, the offshore oil and gas, petroleum. These high reliability organizations have at their core a systematic and open-minded approach in understanding the threats and the potential of harm and how that may work. So at Dam Safety, you will have heard earlier in the week from Chris about what are the important themes that we are tackling at the moment. And Peter and Jason will share with you some thoughts today about how we organize ourselves around these carefully selected and important pieces of risk. We're a small agency. We need to be dynamic, we need to be effective, and we need to be efficient. And also from our government, there is a challenge for us to be economic. And in that sense, we mean that the work we do is trusted and valued by the state and is not seen as an untimely or an expensive burden on the dam owners whom we regulate. So we want to, as we look at the opportunities to tackle these threats of harm, excuse me, is to reduce our reliance on rigorous schedules and audit programs of work and focus on tackling the problems on the big picture issues that are going to cause significant harm to the New South Wales community who we share. And we aim to describe the public value narrative in terms of the harms that we've reduced, what we've done to intervene with dam owners to make sure that the overall community is safer and that dams are operated at a level that is acceptable to the New South Wales community. Next slide, please, Basan. So this concept of public value is about keeping the score. And the notion is the work largely of Mark Moore and others at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, one of Malcolm Sparrow's colleagues there in Boston. And Mark has written some years ago about the notion of creating public value, but his most important work in recent years was about recognizing public value. How do you measure it? And how do you keep the score? And his concept is of what he calls the strategic triangle, about the operational capacity. What's the right choice about our operating model and the people we recruit, like the people we have on our team? Do we have the right policies in place that are effective and easy to understand? Are we generating with the community we regulate good ideas? And this is what he calls the operational capacity. That's the internal aspect of how dam safety would work. And the public value is about our mission, safe dams for New South Wales, and the satisfaction. How do we be an effective regulator and meet the expectations of our shareholders, our ministers, and the communities they serve? The legitimacy of what we do, how effective we are, and how credible we are as a regulator is going to be interpreted by our funders, which at the moment is the New South Wales government, but the New South Wales Premier late last year asked the economic regulator, the Independent Economic Umpire in New South Wales, the Independent Pricing Regulatory Tribunal, IPART, to do a review of how we could shift potentially the cost burden from central government to dam owners themselves. And so IPART, the Independent Economic Umpire, is evaluating and reviewing the performance and the effectiveness of Dam Safety New South Wales, and will make recommendations to government about how a dam safety levy could be imposed on industry so that industry looks to fund our work rather than the central treasury. Obviously, media is a key actor in building the legitimacy and support. So what we refer to sometimes in the Western world as the fourth estate, the media, have a significant role to play. Often regulators dread media getting involved in their work. I'm a big believer in the collaboration and opportunity that is available by working, closely and engaging with the media because of their common interest, because the common interest of journalists and the media and in delivering public interest and our shared interest in delivering public value should align nicely. So that operational capacity plus the public value we deliver in our impact and our outcomes, together with the legitimacy and support, is the strategic triangle that underpins this public value scorecard that Mark Moore writes about. And it's making sure that what we do, and more importantly, how we do it, is done in a way that's perceived as legitimate, and that we build and sustain public trust and value. So we move to the next slide, please. In Australia recently, there was a royal commission at a federal level. A former High Court judge, Ken Hayne, who's an eminent jurist and legal scholar, looked at the performance and the conduct of the financial services industry. Most importantly, Ken Hayne made a number of recommendations in his final report into misconduct in the financial services sector, talking about notions of accountability and how they lie at the heart of governance. And so this is critical to the efficacy and the choices we make in our regulatory model about assigning responsibility in our regulatory system to the dam owners to have a dam safety management system, which Chris introduced earlier in the week, that Peter and Jason will talk more about the mechanics of this. And not only is it done at a technical level, deep within an organization, but the structures and processes and the oversight that dam owners have through their governance structures and their boards in particular. So our model is one where we hold the dam owner to account, and our job is to support them to be able to understand and meet their obligations under New South Wales law. So this sense of accountability is core in the Australian regulatory system, to the heart of what's good and needed about governance. So our work at Dam Safety New South Wales is to make sure that the whole system is working effectively to make sure that the prevention of harms and the promotion of public stewardship by dam owners is balanced, and that there are good outcomes and impact delivered. Next slide, please. I mentioned earlier about the role of the fourth estate in the media. It's interesting that there have been a number of notable failures in the Australian corporate community, and not just the corporate community, but the public sector community in the last couple of years. These have been notable failures of the accountability paradigm, that governance has failed. And a journalist by the name of Bernard Keane, who is a prolific writer and analyst of public affairs in Australia, wrote late last year about his article in the Guardian was described as something's rotten in the system, and it was analysis of 5 major examples in Australia of where there are breakdowns in accountability and governance that are led to loss of public trust and confidence in entities and organizations. On the right-hand side of this slide, above the photograph of Bernard, the author, the journalist, he gives a summary, a pithy summary of Qantas, our national carrier. You may be flying Qantas this year, you know, it was one of the most trusted brands in Australia. Its brand status has, and therefore its social license, has eroded in recent years. And it's interesting, his summary of how one of the most well-regarded institutions in Australia, our national carrier, has lost its way in terms of dealing with the community it serves, its customers, as well as its funders. And you could argue its legitimacy and the support in the community has eroded because of the attitude, the governance, the systems and processes that promote accountability had, according to Bernard and many others, had eroded over time. And it talks about the ability to evade regulation and its belief that it was untouchable as an actor in the system. And on the left-hand side is the summary that Bernard Keane offers his readers of The Guardian about what he sees and what many others would acknowledge as is sadly a common practice across Australian corporate and regulatory life, that companies are investing a lot in thwarting regulators and trying to cultivate the media to operate without accountability. And the objective, he says, just a few months ago, that they're trying to game what passes for the regulatory system here. And the examples he gives are quite diverse, from the mining sector to aviation to the fast-moving consumer goods sector. Next slide, please. So we have a challenge, and that challenge is not only just in the actors who are being regulated in the Australian corporate sector, and of our system, 1/3 of the regulatees are state-owned corporations, 1/3 are local government councils, and another third are private sector mining company, broadly speaking. So we have a slice of things. And last year, as a result of an intervention by our federal government, a federal minister for agriculture intervened to commission an inquiry into what had been a well-regarded and long-standing regulator that is which is actually sitting within the Department of Health now. And it goes to show that if, as a regulator, one is not vigilant and very deliberate and careful in the regulatory design, the regulatory posture, and the supervision and superintendence of the interventions to sabotage the harms, to be able to make sure the dam owners are doing the right things, then bad things will follow. Tears will result. And this timely example, which is a review that was tabled in the federal parliament by the responsible minister, talks about a particular regulator, federal regulator, Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority. But be it that sector, health, mining, dams, environment, natural resources, there is an interesting and salient lesson to be learned here if one pays attention to the key messages. And there are 6 summary themes that were in the executive summary tabled with the minister. And as a result of this report, and as a result of other interventions, the federal minister sacked most of the board chair, who had only just taken up their role in the previous year, very well-regarded senior leader in the commercial and public sector domain in Australia. She resigned, and also the CEO was sacked as well. But what's interesting in these 6 messages are salient kind of warnings to regulators. And this is a particular example and a particular review that, as members of the Dam Safety New South Wales, as the governing entity, as a board, we actually looked at this example to be able to make sure that we were on track as a regulator. And the 6 areas of focus about, do we have the right capacity and capability, excuse me, to know what to do and how to implement compliance and make sure that there is appropriate enforcement, holding actors in the system to account. There were time-framed performance targets that this federal regulator were subscribed to that don't meet regulatory best practice. Our team at Dam Safety New South Wales benchmarks its performance against a regulatory maturity model. And Peter can talk a little bit to the importance of external benchmarking, so that we don't drink from the Kool-Aid and think that, or convince ourselves that our performance is optimal, when in fact, benchmarked against other like and unlike regulators in different sectors, we can see we're either ahead of the game or behind the game. So that's an important part of our approach, to make sure that our targets, what we focus on, and our performance do align with and match regulatory best practice. The interesting comment that the reviewers had of this particular regulator was that it was captured by industry, that it was so close to the actors who were being regulated that it was hard to discern, the difference between the shared interests here. And so that's one of the tensions in a model. Do we promote stewardship or do we focus on the prevention of harms, or a mix of both? So in working with the regulated community and of dam owners in New South Wales, last year we went out and tested their sentiment and their experience of working with us. Do they understand the system they're being held to account? Are we constructive? Are we doing the right thing? Do they feel there's a good sense of balance? And this, again, is an external reference point to help us at a board know that we're on track and can deliver this public value, that we have the legitimacy and the support to continue to have the trust and confidence of the government and the communities that we serve. The reviews that regulator had done were not timely. They dragged on for many years. And also, staff turnover impacted capability across all of its areas. This example, this regulator wasn't helped because it was relocated from Sydney up to regional New South Wales, and it made the retention and the attraction and skilling up of staff quite a challenge. And the other thing that the minister was advised about is that the governance structure and the relationship between the board and the CEO was not optimal. And so that's something that at Dam Safety, we're vigilant about. Last year, we commissioned an extensive, hard-hitting external governance and board effectiveness review to make sure that we've got external review and challenge of how we do our work, how we relate to management, and have we got are we, as appointed members, appointed by the Minister for Water, the Honourable Rose Jackson, are we doing the right thing by the community we serve? Are we meeting our obligations? And are we supporting our team for success, but then also being held to account for the work that we do? So if I move to the next slide, I think that's the last one. It is. Excuse me. Hopefully there, and I'm happy to take any questions, is a top-level view about the regulatory opportunities, the choices we have in the work we do to shape harm reduction, to focus on the delivery of public value, and doing so by picking important problems and then fixing them, and doing so with the dam owners and experts in the community, being mindful of international better practice and guidance, and making sure that as we deliver public value, we keep the score, that we build the operational capacity, we are clear about the public value that we serve, and that we are constantly building and reinforcing the legitimacy and support for the efforts that we have. Ultimately, we want to be accountable for our outcomes and our impact, and we need to be mindful of some of the concerning trends that we're seeing across corporate and public sector in Australia. So Chris's earlier introduction in the week, or introduction earlier in the week of the dam safety model, can now be explained a little more deeply by these regulatory choices that Peter Boyd will talk about, and how they're operationalized through the work that Jason and his team have. But I'm happy, Basant, to take any questions in terms of the work of the board or some of these regulatory challenges that we have.
Thank you, Paul. And this was really an excellent presentation. And I think the way you described what the dam safety and regulation is, harm reduction, so that it's effective, timely, and practical. And I think what it's harm reduction is much more than the technical fix. It's about policy, governance, social, economic, everything comes together, environmental. So clearly I like that idea. And also the examples you gave about the importance of regulation, how things can fail, and how regulation need to work. I think really good fundamental messages. So thank you very much. So I would like to have some comment or questions for Paul. And please name yourself also.
Namaskar, Paul. I am Manoj Kumar. I am Senior Joint Commissioner in Ministry of Jal Shakti, Government of India. I am looking after the implementation of Dam Safety Act, which has been recently enacted in India. Your presentation was really good. First of all, your topic of the presentation was really very eye-catching. The topic was just regulatory opportunity, a focus on the prevention of harms. Basically, the entire focus of the dam safety regulations and act is to avoid the dam-related disasters. So basically, it is the basic objectives of our Dam Safety Act, as you described the basically regulatory authority roles and responsibility. I just wanted to tell you that in Indian context, we have 4 tiers of regulatory mechanism in our country. So at central level, we have created a National Dam Safety Authority, which acts as a regulatory body in India, which will oversee all the dam safety activities in the country, and they have to issue the necessary directions to all the dams, all the dam owners, to enforcement of the act. Similarly, at the central level, we have also created a National Committee on Dam Safety. It's act as a basically think tank, and who will supervise the functioning of the National Dam Safety Authority. And they will also lay down the various guidelines and dam safety norms, standards for its implementation in India. At the state level, we have another two sort of organizations. One is called state dam safety organizations. So, state dam safety organizations will be responsible for the basically day-to-day activity, implementation of day-to-day activity of the act at the state level. And similarly, at the central level, we are also having a state committee on dam safety. So, a state committee on dam safety will basically we will oversee the activities of state dam safety organization, and they will also advise and they will also give the necessary direction to a state dam safety organization. But in the act, basically, we have very clear-cut roles and responsibility defined under the all the core entity, National Dam Safety Authority, National Committee on Dam Safety, state dam safety organizations, and a state committee on dam safety. But right now, we are facing a lot of challenges in terms of organizational structures, capacity building of the dam owners. Although we have created these institutions, but right now, basically all the organizations are having issues of related to experienced manpower, adequate staffings, their skill set trainings at the both at the center level and state level. You have rightly basically mentioned the basically role of the regulatory. What should be the role of the regulatory body? So it should basically it should be some mechanism to overview the function of the regulatory bodies also. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Fahim Haider. So I'm Director, Central Water Commission, Government of India. So can you please come to the second slide?
Second from the beginning.
Yeah. Next one. Right.
Is this one?
Yeah. Okay, so go to the front. So I just wanted to have some more information on point, which is reduce reliance on programmatic functional tasks. So what actually does it mean? What type of tasks are those?
So one of the choices that regulators have is, do they focus on process orientation? Do they focus on building scheduled programs of review and careful auditing of systems, which has a legitimacy? Many regulators thrive on building robust functional tasks to review. And there is a role for that in any system, and Jason can talk about the how we implement our auditor program. But the challenge that Malcolm Sparrow throws out to regulators across the world, and has written extensively about this, is to be able to look at altering the focus away from pure reliance on these functions and look for what other things that do not seem to be right at a broad level in any system, and try and unpack and understand these problems or issues as they are, and to take a problem-centered approach and organize teams and audits and reviews that focus on problems rather than scheduled programs of work. If there's an issue with a particular type of dam, or a particular compliance with a dam safety management system, or a risk management report, or some obligation, instead of saying, well, we're scheduled to look at that in the middle of 2025, because that's our program of work and we've got it scheduled and it's due back then, and we'll worry about that at that time. But if we hear from dam owners, if we hear from communities who are affected by this, that there is a particular problem to be tackled, how do we organize a team to look at and explore and unpack this particular problem. And an example that we'll be debating next week at our meeting of Dam Safety New South Wales is to look at the risk reporting that is an obligation on dam owners in this first cycle of supervision by Dam Safety New South Wales in our new regulatory model. And what we're seeing is that for many dam owners, there are poor levels of compliance with this risk reporting. So at an operational level, as we look through and assess, we gather the data, and we're exploring the idea of Peter taking some time soon to really step back and try and analyze and understand what are the drivers and the causes of this apparent non-compliance. What can we be doing with dam owners to tweak our system? How do we fix the problem to promote compliance and to promote a good sense of accountability by dam owners to do things better and efficiently? Is it that the process is poorly understood? Is it a matter of education? Is it a matter of, well, dam owners know what to do, but it's a problem of getting the right expert support from the consulting engineering profession? Perhaps that's the problem where we need to tackle. And the solutions to these problems will vary according to the nature of the data and the insight and the intelligence that our teams would gather. So that's, an example of that. Malcolm Sparrow gives a banking industry example in the Netherlands, where the central regulator, the prudential supervisor of banks that was based in Amsterdam, looking at the banking system across the Netherlands, was organized according to rigorous schedules and programs of work. And what that regulator did was to actually just blow up the model and organize its teams focused around particular problems that were being experienced by consumers, by the regulators in the financial services system in the Netherlands, and completely change the way that banking regulation is undertaken in the Netherlands, and then shaping how across Europe banking regulators tackle their regulatory obligations. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more detail about how this choice of being problem-centered as opposed to program or process-centered gives regulators. It's not that one's right or wrong. Malcolm Sparrow would argue that it's more effective and that the evidence shows that that one can build and deliver and create greater legitimacy, support, and public value by being problem-oriented, and to be able to, in his book, The Character of Harms, he talks about how do you sabotage the harm? How do you get in and prevent, in these high reliability organizations, the problem never emerging in the first place? And perhaps Peter can talk about some examples in his experience in the aviation sector as well.
Paul, Joop here. I'm an engineer with the World Bank. You sort of answered my question already. Yesterday we were in Warragamba, and we heard there was a proposal to actually increase the dam, mostly for flood management, flood control. But a lot of different interests, environmentalists were against it. So my question was going to be, how do you actually support the dam owner with what is important from a hydrological or from a dam safety point of view, but because of all the other interests may not actually happen? And you said, of course, the dam owner is accountable, but you as a regulator will support them. So maybe you or Peter can maybe go a little bit in detail, because these are interesting examples where you have to balance the different interests of communities and lobbyists to try to come to the best solution.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's a part of the tension that any regulator has in delivering its public value. We have the functions that we perform as a regulator under our legislation are expressly said to have to be exercised to promote the objects of the Act. And the first object of the Act is that the community understands implicitly, but accepts the residual risks to public safety, to the environment, and to economic assets that may emerge from the potential failure of a dam, so that there is a community engagement. And so this is one of the important paradigms that is placed in our regulatory model that is different from the past. This is no longer just a pure engineering technical risk, technical assessment. Our legislation has shifted, and Peter will explain more deeply about the within a dam safety management system, the role of risk management and cost-benefit analyses to and their interplay, so that dam owners can make informed judgments, so that they can demonstrate to the community that their dam is as safe as is reasonably practicable. And that's taking into account the risk mitigation measures as well. Our accountability as the regulator, excuse me, is to hold the dam owners to account, to make sure that they've followed the process, so that their development of a safety case is rigorous, that it is comprehensive, that it is reviewed, building onto this accountability model, that the governance systems within the dam owner sign off on the efficacy of the risk reduction measures, the remedial measures that would be required here. And there is a tension, of course, whether it's a nuclear facility, an offshore oil and gas platform, the operation of airlines. They're too big to fail, so to speak. And we have in Warragamba Dam one of the most important economic and most valuable assets in the state of New South Wales, but at the same time, potentially its most dangerous asset. And how do you balance this tension between the public good that's delivered by the efficient operation of Warragamba Dam, and to be able to make sure that from a water security, from a flood mitigation, from a climate change mitigation, it's running effectively, but it's also running safely as well.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, go on.
Yeah, Paul, one more question. We were in Hunter water and yesterday in New South Wales water. You mentioned risk management. It seems a lot of the investments were done already in the past. Auxiliary spillway in Warragamba, the fuse plug. Hunter is strengthening the embankment. Is the future more in management of the dam to reduce the risk, or do you think still a lot of investments are needed to improve the safety of the dam, which is something in India we are we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on improving the dam with physical interventions, spillway enlargement, grouting, foundation strengthening, etc. Here, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe we also didn't go into much discussion with the dam owners, but it seems that is not so much on the agenda. It's more about the inspections and fixing things if you see something, rather than major modernization of dams or fixing problems. Maybe you or one of your colleagues can comment on that later also.
Yeah, I think it's for the team to comment, because I'm relatively new to this sector, but the focus on risk management and cost benefit analyses will underpin and drive a prioritization. For example, with Water New South Wales, as it looks at making a strategic business case to the New South Wales government for potentially enormous investment in the upgrading of infrastructure across Cataract, Warragamba, other dams. Hunter Water also needing to build a strategic business case to be able to address the legacy impacts of infrastructure that's almost a century old. And we have many of the dams in New South Wales that are well over 75 years old. So there's a limit to what can be done to improve them cost effectively in terms of fiddling at the edges, as opposed to major investments in infrastructure development. We see across the border, north in Queensland. Just recently, the water operator, Sunwater, and the Queensland government announcing a huge investment program to be able to essentially replicate the dam wall for Paradise Dam because of failures in its design, well, not so much the design, but the building of that dam just only several years ago. And so the government in that state and the water operator, Sunwater, having to make a choice and explain to the communities that they serve, large agricultural communities, people reliant on irrigation and water supply, that this potentially could be compromised and become very expensive in years to come because of the failures of the building. So we've got some interesting examples here in Australia. Paradise Dam, the opportunities ahead with Warragamba, Hunter Water, that's leading a major program of community engagement to get its local community up to speed and understanding the nature of the challenges. But I'll defer to Chris and Peter and Jason for some other examples to be able to address that concern that you've identified.
Okay, Rajiv. Yeah.
I'll just add to your question there. As I explained on Monday, so we're just starting this risk-based journey. So dam owners have only, well, we've gone through a first year of submitting risk reports. So I guess we're going to see a lot of things coming out of that, and we're already starting to see things coming out of that. The dams that have been deficient as a result of the risk reports. So previously it was very much a standards-based lens that was used, but now with changes in design inputs, hydrology, that's all feeding to the risk assessments. I think we're going to see another wave of dams that notionally are deficient. And what do dam owners do with those things? So I think in the next few years, you're going to see a very different profile of, as a result of those risk assessments that have been done.
Thank you, Chris.
Hi, Paul. I'm Raj Gopal from the World Bank. I'm part of the dam safety program implementing in India. My question is regarding the board's relation with the ministry, the minister, right? So my understanding is that the New South Wales government through the ministry funds the regulator, including the board, and they monitor it. So there's a thin line between monitoring and impinging upon the independence role of the regulator. So just wanted to understand what is the relationship? How do the monitoring takes place? How much you report? How you maintains your independence, the role of a regulator. So these are some of the areas we'd like to understand from you.
Thank you. Peter can describe more when he talks about the mechanics of this, but this independence of the regulator was a cornerstone principle in the design of the dam safety legislation, and to hardwire this independence into the Act and the regulations. So my appointment is by the Minister for Water. She made that appointment, or her predecessor in the previous government made that appointment with cabinet support, and then that appointment happens. So our independence in the meetings that Chris is CEO and who is a public servant who works for the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and the Water, to serve the interests of the independent regulator. We are not public servants in the conventional sense, in the sense of being working for the department, but we're appointed by the minister and are accountable through the Minister for Water for the outcomes and to deliver the functions effectively, efficiently, and economically, and we're held to account on that. So we have performance objectives. We have an annual report. Our performance is tabled in each year in the state parliament. It's subject to scrutiny. The minister can be asked questions on notice, without notice, in the parliament, on the floor, about our performance and about concerns. The minister has the ability to ask us to undertake reviews. We have the ability to be able to commission reviews, undertake inquiries, establish committees of our own volition, and we can do that, and we're fully empowered to do that. The question of the funding is an interesting one because we are centrally funded at the moment as a largesse of the Treasury, but this model is about to shift, as was anticipated by the parliamentary draftsperson when they designed the legislation to create a dam safety fund and for us to be funded by a levy that is imposed on the consumers. I've been a regulator at the federal level in Australia in two different regulatory systems that were entirely 100% funded by the industries that they regulated. One in the maritime sector and one in the workplace sector, workplace regulator. And so I have experience in this tension, and this will be an interesting transition from government funding across to industry funding, because then you have the complexity of those tensions is amplified, because we still have the accountability to deliver to government, but we have to do it in a way that industry, that our legitimacy and our support using the Mark Moore's strategic triangle is reinforced by not just our ministers, but also from the funders and the community at large. And all the more so when we're looking at high reliability organizations like dams, that where they don't fail often, but if they do, they've got catastrophic consequences. So Peter, perhaps you could pick that up when you talk in your next paper as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Paul, for the excellent presentation and discussion. It's very useful. From my side, I have two.
Your name?
Sorry, I'm Kunduz Masalkanova from Green Climate Fund. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
You're on mute.
Yes, but if you could speak just a little more slowly,
If you
so
can
I can
come
pick
in.
up.
Maybe I can, I don't know where.
Yeah,
is it?
yeah, it should be okay.
It's hanging,
Okay.
hanging from the ceiling.
Okay. So do you hear me well now? Okay, thank you for the excellent discussion and presentation. It's very useful. From my side, I have two questions on which your perspective would be very useful to hear. So first, during the field visit, we learned that climate change is not yet incorporated in the risk analysis. And so from your perspective, what is your, how to close this gap? So any actions are being taken on how to incorporate climate change in the risk analysis, and also from not only from adaptation, but also from the mitigation perspective. And the second is, you mentioned that the cost benefit analysis is one of the main decision-making element. So if you could elaborate more in terms of whether you do have standard approach to the cost benefit analysis, and if you can just share a few points on that would be very useful, because obviously there are many different elements in cost benefit analysis in terms of Australia and India, so it would be good to learn a little bit on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Two very good questions. Firstly, how do the impacts of climate change turn up in our regulatory model? What we're encouraging dam owners to do in their risk analyses, and Peter and Jason can talk more fully about this, is for the dam owners to have a better and deeper understanding with the improved science and improved knowledge and the improved rigor of the technical assessments, to have a understanding of both the intensity and the magnitude of the weather events and the changing cycle over time, and whether their infrastructure is capable of withstanding both the intensity and the modulation of that over time. There's some interesting analysis, and Chris, I can't remember if he's still in the room.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. You had, I remember, to our friends from the Korean government, you presented an interesting slide on that, and I
Yeah.
think impact of
With climate change, I just see that is just another risk amongst many risks that dam owners need to assess. Where we are with that is there was quite a extensive multi-year, university study done on warming climate and impacts on rainfall intensities. That is currently now the research has concluded, and that's being fed into design manuals. So we have one of the key design inputs is a document called the Australian Rainfall and Runoff. So that is actually being updated now as we speak. It's out for draft and comment. In particular, the chapter on climate change is being updated. So in about 12 months' time, that's going to be a manual. It's going to be a design input. And so our expectation is, you know, in the next cycle of risk assessments, or the cycle that dam owners are doing, that's just going to feed into another input into their risk assessments. In terms of cost benefit analysis, not to hold up time, but our New South Wales Treasury publish a really good document on cost benefit analysis and what should be considered, and so that's publicly available, and our expectation is dam owners follow that.
Wonderful. So
Yeah.
if you could share what we.
Yeah, happy to share, very happy to share that.
If
Basant, I'll hand over to my colleagues.
Yeah.
It's been a privilege to say hello, albeit from a distance, but from the very pretty Melbourne. Maybe on a subsequent visit to Australia, you may get to enjoy these parts. And I wish your delegation well and safe travels. And may your respective IPL teams do well in the year ahead.
Thank you very much, Paul. It has been wonderful presentation and discussion, and some of the deeper insights you have. So really appreciate and grateful for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
So